Let's talk about the scenario the world still seems afraid to say out loud. What happens if the Islamic Republic in Iran falls? Not reforms, not a controlled scripted political exercise, falls. The first thing that needs to be said clearly is this. This would be an overwhelmingly positive development for the Middle East and for the entire world. Iran today is not just another authoritarian state. It is the central engine of global terror infrastructure. It is the financial, military, and ideological backbone of a proxy network stretching from Lebanon to Gaza to Yemen and beyond. Remove the regime, and that network collapses. Hezbollah does not survive as a strategic threat without Iran. Hamas cannot rearm or rebuild at scale without Iran, and Houthis lose relevance and reach the moment Iranian backing disappears. These are not organic resistance movements. They are dependent franchises. Let me preempt a common objection. Even where groups like Hamas receive secondary funding from Qatar, Iran remains the only actor capable of turning cash into a sustained military threat. Without Tehran, money alone cannot replace missiles, training, and regional coordination. So let's dispense with the myth that the fall of the Iranian regime creates more danger than it removes. It removes the single largest state sponsor of terrorism on earth. That alone reshapes the Middle East in Israel's favor overnight. But the impact does not stop there. Iran is a pillar of a broader anti-Western alignment that includes Russia, China, and North Korea, and it extends into the Western Hemisphere through Venezuela and others. Iran is the connective tissue. It supplies drones and weapons to Russia. It shares missile and military expertise with North Korea. It gives China energy leverage and sanctions evasion pathways. It underwrites terror and criminal networks that reach into the Americas. If the Iranian regime falls, this entire axis loses coherence. Russia loses a strategic partner in the Middle East. China loses a revolutionary ally that bleeds and distracts the West. North Korea becomes more isolated, and Venezuela loses an external backer that helped internationalize its anti-American posture. Now let's talk about the regional powers Iran has distorted for decades. Start with Turkey. Turkey is not a guaranteed beneficiary of Iran's fall. It is a swing power. One possibility is that without Iran exporting Shiite revolutionary chaos, Turkey loses its favorite excuse for regional meddling and faces pressure to normalize and de-escalate. But there is another possibility, and credit here goes to Brett Stevens for articulating it clearly. Turkey could interpret the collapse of Iranian influence and the weakening of Shiite Islam as an opening to advance its own Sunni Islamist project, a neo-Ottoman vision, a soft caliphate strategy dressed up as regional leadership. Which path Turkey takes is not automatic. It depends on Western clarity, leverage, and red lines. Iran's fall removes a destabilizer, but it also creates a competition for influence that the West must actively shape. Now, contrast that with Qatar. Qatar survives by playing all sides, hosting U.S. forces while funding Islamist movements, sheltering Hamas leaders while branding itself a neutral mediator. Iran's existence enables that duplicity. Remove Iran, and Qatar loses strategic cover. Doha is forced to choose between integration into a pragmatic regional order or isolation as a patron of movements with no future. Then there's Saudi Arabia. Saudi behavior over the last decade has been reactive, not ideological. Iran forced Riyadh into proxy wars, uneasy truces, and defensive diplomacy. Even outreach to Tehran was about exhaustion, not reconciliation. If the Iranian regime falls, Saudi Arabia becomes proactive again. Less proxy warfare, less appeasement, more modernization, and far more freedom to quietly align with Israel where interests already overlap. And nowhere is this clearer than in the UAE. The UAE already behaves like a post-ideological state. Trade, technology, security, cooperation, normalization. Iran's regime is the primary obstacle to that model spreading. Remove Iran, and the UAE model becomes the template. The Abraham Accords stop being fragile and start becoming foundational. Now, quick aside before I finish. You'll notice the coffee on the table here? That's Iron Dome coffee. I want to be very clear about this. This is not novelty coffee. This is not symbolic coffee. This is actually good coffee. I've been drinking their hazelnut roast and I genuinely like it. I would not put this on my table or in my videos if it didn't taste really good. But there's something else that matters. At a time when so many people and organizations are boycotting Israel, Israeli products, and anything associated with the Jewish state, I actually enjoy making a purchase that goes directly against that trend. This is a product that tastes good and stands for something I believe in. Iron Dome Coffee supports Israel, Israeli resilience, and the men and the women of the Israel Defense Forces. That matters to me. It's close to my heart. So if you're going to buy coffee anyway, this is a simple way to do two things at once. Drink something that you'll actually enjoy and support Israel in a very real, tangible way. Back to the point. The Islamic Republic does not just threaten Israel. It freezes the entire region in distorted defensive postures. It forces hedging, it rewards duplicity, it incentivizes ideology over stability. If the regime falls, the Middle East does not become perfect, but it becomes legible. Power aligns with interests instead of slogans. States are judged by behavior instead of ideology, and the region begins moving from revolutionary politics to post revolutionary order. The Islamic Republic is not a stabilizing force whose absence creates danger. It is a destabilizing force whose absence creates opportunity. And this time, the West needs to be ready, not just to react, but to shape what comes next.